Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cactus Lounge. I'm Donna Reed. I traveled in Cast A 1976. Most of you who are watching this probably already are aware of that. Normally, these interviews are done via Zoom. Every once in a while, I'm in the same room with someone, as with Wayne Chandler and Tim Lane. This time, we are here at my office in Tucson because there's an event happening in Tucson, and we're going to move forward in a little bit different format. Today, we're going to talk about the formation of the Up With People International Alumni Association. As such, we are not the youngest crowd, just saying. And I am going to ask each person here to introduce themselves and tell when they first traveled in Up With People. John, let's start with you.
Hi, well, I'm John Parker. I was recruited in college in '65 by Rusty Wales and Tap Stevens and Francis, who were all in Warrior Army, and went to Mackinac in 1965.
So Mackinac Island, for those of you who might be watching this that don't know, is in northern Michigan. So, Mark.
Great morning, Mark Kinzemius. I traveled in Cast A 1979.
1979. Pat.
I'm Pat Barry Glassner, and I traveled in Up With People High School in 1969-70.
Jerry Shelsta, and I traveled in Cast C 1972.
So right there may be some things that some of the younger people don't even know. The Up With People High School, the Mackinac Island, right? Sure. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the beginnings of the Alumni Association. And I had been sent some information, and now I already found out this morning that that might not be correct. So I had been told that it was sort of beginning in 1987, but John, why don't you tell our listeners what you already said to me about 1985?
Well, I was on the board of Up With People. Supposedly, it wasn't officially the alumni representative, but that's the way the alumni felt about it. And I was on there for 17 years. And so anyway, I moved to Lake City after I left Up With People. So in 1985, I had the idea to get a reunion together of the 65 to 68, which at that time would have been sing-outs, and have a reunion. But I have to give some context to the whole thing. So Up With People was possible because of Maury Armit, because all the staff, all the knowledge and everything from producing shows, stage crew management, marketing, everything was all developed over the many years that Up With People. I mean, Maury Armit took plays all over the world. So they formed the whole backbone of Sing Out and then Up With People. In 1960, Mackinac Island was owned by a conference center, was owned by Maury Armit.
Oh.
And so in 1964, Peter Howard, who at that point was the head of Maury Armit, challenged everybody to go out and recruit college students all over the U.S. to come to the conference in 1965. Because he felt that at that time that where America went would have a major impact on how the rest of the world went. So he wanted to focus on getting a bunch of new people into the thing. So like I said before, I was recruited in game, and a whole bunch of other people came, and it was a lot of new people coming into Maury Armit, and they had put together a weekly show that was the Caldwell brothers kind of anchored it, and then there was a skit, and then the people that were at the conference wrote original songs. And so that was a weekly thing that was put together, which ended up getting, before the summer was over, we were invited to Cape Cod, New York World's Fair, Hilton and Washington, were a lot of senators and congressmen, and then Watts, and then Japan, and then Korea, and so forth. So that was the whole launching of Sing Out. And then 2 years later, there was 2 more casts. So this whole thing was just kind of an explosion, and nobody really had control over it, more or less. So,
May or may not have changed over the years.
so because of this, there were a lot of people that had hurt feelings and bitterness and so forth. So when I came up with this idea, I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. So the problems that is that the Moriarmid people had worked for Moriarmid for years, never got paid, worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So this whole thing got going. And when they had to leave because they were sick or couldn't take it anymore or whatever and left, there was never any acknowledgments or thanks or whatever for all your contribution. And then the whole demise of Pace magazine, which was also made up 90% from Moriarmid people plus some younger people that had came into it. The closing of that was handled very badly. So there was some real bitter feelings about that. And then the kicker to the whole thing was when Up With People incorporated in 1968, the official story was that everything before that was gone, disappeared, never talked about again, and never happened. So the people that had spent all that time doing that were not exactly happy about that. So I went to Los Angeles, Seattle, Toronto, New York City, and Atlanta, and met with people from that group to say, do you want to get together or not, or whatever. So the conclusion of that was that yes, they wanted to get together. So my assistant, in those days we called her a secretary, but my assistant and I took on to organize the first reunion in Silver Creek in 1986. But also as a result of that trip, I was meeting with people in small groups and we had plenty of time to talk and everything. So I was just totally blown away with what they were doing, what their careers were, their knowledge, and just their whole being. And it just struck me of how come Up With People is not, or Sing Out at that point is, well, no, at that point it was Up With People,
by then,
is
yeah.
not utilizing all that knowledge and experience from the alumni. And I formed an allegory in my mind, being kind of a hillbilly, where it was like a guy with an orchard that raises apples, and then he lets them all fall on the ground and rot. So that whole thing was the germination of my idea to form the Alumni Association, to try to pull that together.
John, let me pause for just a second. So since I traveled in 76, you're talking now about 86, right? 1980s?
No.
Oh, I thought that's what you said.
Talking about 1968 was when Up With People incorporated.
Right, but when you were doing what we know as the beginnings of the alumni, when was Silver Creek?
The Sing Out.
The Sing-Out, when was
reunion
that?
Was in 86.
Yeah, in 86.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
sorry.
I'm trying to remember if I went to a
Somewhere
10-year
in 86.
reunion
Yeah.
and what that would have been. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, sorry.
So, no, that's fine. I need all the help I can get. So,
Great.
so anyway,
You had the allegory and Up With People.
Yeah, I got that.
Next
So-
level was Sing Out.
so to make a long story short, the Sing Out reunion at Silver Creek and the 4th of July, 1986 happened. And it had a good turnout, and I'm really irritated, and hopefully maybe you could add it to the video. I have the picture of everybody that was there, but I couldn't find it. So anyway, there was a lot of healing took place. Blanton and Betty came, and Jim and Carol McLennan came. So they kind of, so anyway, and I think Mark was there, so I don't know, you got any thoughts
Were you there in
about that?
86, Mark?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
like many of us in Up With People, we find ourselves in places we wonder, how in the world did I get here? And that was one of those moments. My wife Jeannie and I were fresh off the road of cast directors for Cast A 85, 86. So here we are, summer of 86, and people, senior management asked if I want to be director of alumni. And I said, sure. Not knowing at all what that meant. And I was the only, Jeannie and I were the only Up With People alumni at the Sing Out reunion that were not part of Sing Out.
Wow.
And it was such a privilege. I even sensed some of the emotion when I can feel John's emotion, and I come at it from a different place, because it was like, wow, I had no idea this foundational, not just work, but passion of these folks who really were the germinations, the genesis of what I was benefiting from. And there was this big disconnect, and so a bridge was beginning to be formed, and John carried that load to a great extent. I think the other couple who were there was helpful were Steve and Terry Woods, because Steve was a part of these original beginnings of Up With People, from Sing Out. And so I think we observed and respectfully watched, but we were welcomed. We were not ostracized or shunned. People were
Like you're not
interested.
part of us, you shouldn't be here.
I didn't feel that at all, but it was really a privileged experience to have been there. And I'm enormously grateful for John, not only during that time, but it's all these years later, and even today, this sense of stewardship that you have of the beginnings of Up With People, and really its desire for, it's about the mission, and it's great need even today. And we don't know what form it would take in the future, but I hope any alumni, especially young alumni watching this, might be inspired by this foundational work, this sacrifice, and who knows, what will come, but we want to be open to whatever that would be.
So then, in 1987, I'm gonna tell you my story that I've heard.
Wait.
Wait, okay. John, okay, go. Keep
I
going.
told you couldn't lead me.
Okay. Keep going.
So, and later in 1986, and I have no idea what the date was, I went to Tucson to meet with Blanton, and I don't know whether Mark was in that meeting, in the administration, to talk about forming the Alumni Association. And on the whole, it was accepted positively. I found out in later years from people who were there that there was some question about whether I was doing this to take over Up With People. So thank you very much. I was very happy in Colorado. But as a result of that, Mark basically put together an ad hoc meeting that took place in March of 87, and 129 alumni came to that first meeting, which Pat was.
Is that this list that
Yeah.
got emailed to me?
Uh-huh.
Wow, that was amazing for me to read and to see the names of the people that I know and don't know, and how many honestly aren't with us.
Yeah,
You know?
that's right.
Yeah.
So do you want to say anything about that gathering, or?
Me?
Yeah.
You were there.
I was there.
All right, 1987,
Oh
we're
my
here
God.
now, right?
But
19
there's a whole bunch of stuff that had to happen before I showed up. Wanted to come to Silver Creek, but I was very pregnant at the time. So that wasn't something that I could do. So when I was invited to come down to Tucson, schlepping my 6-month-old with me, I was thrilled, because I was living in Minneapolis at the time, and when I got there, I don't know, it's not from heaven, voices from Blanton, I have no idea. I sought out alumni in the area, and we started to have the best time. We would get together and we'd reminisce and we'd talk and we'd do unusual things, surprise, surprise. And so I guess Mark had heard of these efforts and included me in coming down to Tucson. So I was very honored and very thrilled to be able to be there. I was just one of the crowd, but it was thrilling. It was fascinating. All the groundwork that Mark had done, we instantly said, yes, this is something that has to happen. It has to happen.
So you all, I want to ask, as somebody that absolutely doesn't know, so it's 1987, you're having this meeting. As far as I knew, I was already an alumni, and I went to a 5-year reunion that was planned by somebody, somewhere. So now it's a 10-year, it's 1986 going into 87, which would have been 11 years after I was in Up With People. Did the incarnation of the IAA come because, I'm gonna be really blunt, because Up With People couldn't handle it? Or because we needed the Alumni Association to be a separate 501c3? Oh, John's laughing.
I am, because you were trying to leave me and I covered all that.
You're covering all that about the 501c3? Did you already
Yep.
say that?
You bet you.
Okay, I didn't hear that piece.
Well, you're about to find out.
Okay,
Because
okay,
believe
so
me,
tell me this piece, John.
I've had all kinds of alumni ask me why we did that.
Okay,
So, and Mark, you may want to talk about that.
Well, I might just add, which would lead into it, is following the sing-out reunion, and I had a ton of energy just coming off the road, quite naively, but it seemed like the natural next step is, let's find out what other organizations do that have successful alumni associations. So actually, called up the president of the Yale Alumni Association, Harvard, and Dartmouth, and flew out there, met with them in person. 27-year-old guy meeting a 60-something-year-old on this really incredible, 150-year-old building with all this history, trying to explain it for people, and our desire to connect with the former members. And but out of that, they were kind enough. I got the articles of incorporation, the bylaws from these organizations, and their advice on what they would do if they were me, and Up With People, and brought all that information back. So we and then went to some state universities, of course, the U of A being so handy, and some others. So we did have some very real case studies to follow, and then try to apply those into our unique situation, which led to, okay, now we need some leadership, some ad hoc folks. And if I could say, I almost hate to say names because I know for sure I'm going to miss people, but I'm extraordinarily grateful to John, but also Duffy Bledsoe. Duffy was really terrific coming to us. Bruce Wiley was key in all that as well. And they were in these early years as we were trying to figure out what we should be in. I would consider it wasn't that people could handle it. It was the natural. I say natural, lots of bumps. That's reality of life. It's not always easy, but it needed to evolve.
okay,
The alumni office at the time was trying to keep addresses so we can keep in contact with alumni, and then predecessors to me had developed this idea of a reunion every year, and that was really helpful to keep people connected. But that was more or less the extent of what was done up to that time, but there was a lot more, as John had visioned, that we needed to do and could do. And these other organizations found ways, like Yale Alumni, they are proud to be alumni of Yale, and they invest in that, and how can we do that Up With People? So I think it was collectively a desire to do that. How to do that was really important, and that's where the hard work took place.
okay.
In 87 and then 88.
All right, so John.
So at that meeting, there was, I don't know what committees, but there were a number of committees formed and everything. And Sam Lanham was an attorney, and I actually met Sam the first time in 1968 when I was in the Army, and he was in the local sing-out in Culpeper, Virginia. So I'd go over there and teach him dancing and singing, right?
That's scary.
That was
Yeah, no kidding.
When people peaked right there. That was it.
So Sam and I had been friends for a long time, and he was charged with working out the documents between Up With People and the Alumni Association, and formalizing the Alumni Association's formation. So we finally came up with a document that everybody had agreed to, and I can't remember all of it said, but I know the first thing that the Alumni Association said their purpose was to support Up With People, and the second thing was to support the alumni, and then was some other things after that which I can't remember. So anyway, and I don't know whether I got this right or not, but it was Sam and myself and Duffy, and I think Bruce Wiley, and you probably, Mark.
Yep.
And again, I was still on the board during this thing, went to the Up With People board meeting to present our proposal. And our proposal was, among other things, that we wanted to be an independent 501c3. And the board said, not no, but hell no. So we said, all right, we're out of here, and we left.
Wow.
because Sam and I were very clear that it needed to be independent. Now, Sam might have been smart enough to think about maybe Upwood people would have some hard times in the future and what needed to be, but I wasn't that smart, but I had my own reasons. My reasons were, as I said before, I was on the board for many years, and the board members were made up of very successful, very well-off business people. And basically it was their way or the highway. And I knew that if we were under them, we would never be independent. We would be working for Upwood people and Upwood people board. So Sam and I felt really strong about it. So luckily, Bob Marvitt, who was on the board, invited us all to come to the Arizona Inn for breakfast the next day to see if we could work out a compromise, which we did. And as I recall, the compromise was that if the Alumni Association went off the rails, Upwood people could withdraw the name Upwood people.
Oh.
And we agreed to that, and that allowed the whole thing to take place. And
Bob was critical.
oh, if that hadn't happened, I have no idea what would have happened. But anyway, I forgot to mention earlier that Duffy, when we got together with that first big gathering, he had also been thinking about forming the Alumni Association as well. We called him Duffy. His real name was Forrest Bledsoe. So he worked on the committees, and I was the first president, and then he was the second president, and there went on from there. And I would just add that I feel really blessed and honored to be a part of it. But also very grateful for all the many alumni for years have carried the thing forward to this day. And so it's been a rewarding time, and thanks to all the people here and millions of others. It's still going.
And you know what? It's a perfect time for us to take a commercial break. We're at about 30 minutes, so we're going to take a pause, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about since 1987 and what has happened. Okay?